Welcome back to True Freedom. Today, we're diving into one of Friedrich Nietzsche's most profound and challenging ideas, the eternal recurrence. Have you ever wondered, if you had to live the exact same life over and over again, with every joy, sorrow, success, and failure repeated endlessly, how would you feel about it? As Nietzsche once said, there is nothing more fearful than becoming who you truly are. So, would you be ready to face yourself, just like Zarathustra, the ultimate symbol of life affirmation? Imagine if Albert Einstein, with his timeless intellect, had to confront this idea. What would he think? Would he see it as a curse or an opportunity to affirm his existence? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'll explore the meaning of eternal recurrence, how it transforms our perspective on life, and how to apply it in real-world contexts. Now, let's embark on this journey into Nietzsche's mind together. The eternal recurrence is a cornerstone of Nietzsche's philosophy, challenging us to reconsider the very fabric of our existence. In Ex Homo he writes, "I now wish to relate the history of Zarathustra." The fundamental idea of the work, the eternal recurrence, the highest formula of a yes-saying to life that can never be attained, was first conceived in the month of August 1881. This isn't merely a theoretical construct, it's a profound rethinking of how we view life itself. Picture this. What if every moment you've ever lived, every choice, every triumph, every failure was fated to repeat endlessly? Would you welcome it with enthusiasm, or would the sheer weight of the idea overwhelm you? When Nietzsche jotted down this groundbreaking concept on a piece of paper, he added a striking postscript, 6,000 feet beyond man and time. These words capture the vastness of the idea, surpassing mundane human concerns and conventional ideas of time. This video is the first installment of a two-part series on Nietzsche's Eternal Recurrence, created in collaboration with Weltgeist. Together, we'll delve into both the theoretical underpinnings and the real-world implications of this concept for how we live our lives. Be sure to watch Part II, where we explore Nietzsche's eternal recurrence as an actual state of affairs. You'll find a link in the description below, and don't forget to subscribe to Weltgeist's channel for more intellectually stimulating content. To frame our exploration, consider this powerful quote from Nietzsche: "The greatest weight that which gives life meaning is the ability to say yes to everything that has been and will be." How would you fare in the ultimate trial of affirming your life, again and again, for eternity? As Nietzsche was walking through the woods alongside a lake, lost in deep contemplation, he encountered a huge rock that towered aloft like a pyramid. This towering monolith seemed to symbolize the immense weight of existence itself, and it was here that the thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. The eternal recurrence supposes that you'd have to experience the same life, with the same events and experiences, repeated for eternity. Imagine reliving every decision, every triumph, every heartbreak, every mundane moment infinitely. Would you rejoice at the prospect, or would the sheer weight of repetition crush your spirit? It makes its first appearance in the Gay Science under the title The Greatest Weight, where Nietzsche raises the hypothetical question of how you would react if a demon spelled it out to you. To make this idea more tangible, consider this: if you knew that tomorrow would unfold exactly as today, every action, every action, every action, every emotion, how would you approach life differently? As Nietzsche himself reflected, what if someday or night a demon were to steal into your lonely life and say to you, "This life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live innumerable times more"? Would you embrace it? Human reaction to eternal recurrence. Nietzsche suggests that most people would view this idea as a curse, one that demands the most impassioned love of life, to crave nothing more fervently than this ultimate eternal confirmation and seal. The concept is both horrifying and paralyzing, as it carries the unimaginable burden of the heaviest weight. Imagine being told that every mistake, every heartbreak, every moment of pain you've ever endured will happen again exactly as it did before. would you perceive it as a form of cosmic punishment? However, it is also the ultimate affirmation of life. It is the rock that fills the emptiness and weightlessness of nihilism. To truly embrace eternal recurrence requires fati, the love of fate, and the acceptance and affirmation of all events in life, both the joys and the sorrows. This idea forces us to ask, could you look back on your life with all its flaws and declare, yes, I would live it all over again? Think about this. If you knew that tomorrow would unfold exactly as today, how would you approach each moment differently? Would you cherish the small joys, a sunrise, a heartfelt conversation, or would the monotony of repetition crush your spirit? As Nietzsche himself mused, my formula for greatness in a human being is fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. The idea of eternal recurrence does not imply an eternal afterlife, but rather an endless repetition of what defines existence in the present world. It's not about transcending to another realm. It's about fully embracing the here and now, with all its beauty and brutality. Nietzsche's personal response to eternal recurrence. It is crucial to understand just how terrifying Nietzsche himself found the doctrine of eternal recurrence, and how challenging it was for him to accept it. In a moment of despair, he wrote, "I do not want life again. How did I endure it, creating? What makes me stand the sight of it? The vision of the overman who affirms life. I have tried to affirm it myself, alas." His initial reaction was that no idea could be more horrifying. Imagine wrestling with the notion that every moment of suffering, every error, every heartbreak would return to you endlessly. Would you find it empowering or unbearable? However, Nietzsche discovers that there are moments in life that make this concept not only tolerable but beautiful. For example, he reflects on the connection between pain and pleasure, suggesting that the greatest joys often arise from the deepest struggles. He writes, "But what if pleasure and pain should be so closely connected that he who wants the greatest possible amount of the one must also have the greatest possible amount of the other, that he who wants to experience the heavenly high jubilation must also be ready to be sorrowful unto death." This duality highlights Nietzsche's deep understanding of life as a dynamic interplay of opposing forces. Sickness and convalescence are recurring themes in Nietzsche's writings, reflecting his personal battle with chronic illness. Yet, even in his most vulnerable moments, he finds strength. He refers to the pivotal time when great health emerges from sickness as the highest time. Could it be that Nietzsche's own suffering enabled him to embrace eternal recurrence as a form of redemption? Consider this: if Nietzsche had not faced such profound challenges, would he have developed such a revolutionary philosophy? As he famously stated, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." Perhaps it is through enduring life's trials that we come to appreciate its beauty and significance. Critique of Christian and Platonic traditions. The eternal recurrence stands as a profound denial of any absolute beginning, any notion of creation, and the existence of a supreme deity. In doing so, it shatters the foundations of over 2 millennia of Christian thought. This concept is not merely an abstract philosophical idea, rather, it functions as a bold critique and outright rejection of the deeply entrenched Platonic Christian tradition. It seeks to accomplish nothing less than a complete revaluation of values. Imagine, for instance, a world where the static, unchanging perfection of a supernatural God is no longer the ultimate ideal. Instead, this vision is supplanted by the dynamic, ceaseless powers of creation and destruction that reside within nature and humanity itself. As Nietzsche provocatively asks, what if everything that we perceive as permanent is, in fact, in constant flux? Nietzsche's focus sharpens on the age-old philosophical dispute between two opposing doctrines, the doctrine of becoming, often attributed to Heraclitus, and the doctrine of being, linked to Parmenides. This intellectual clash represents one of the most pivotal moments in the history of early Greek philosophy. The former celebrates change impermanence, and the fluidity of existence. You cannot step into the same river twice, as Heraclitus famously declared. The latter, however, champions permanence, stasis, and an unchanging reality. By revisiting this ancient debate, Nietzsche invites us to question our own assumptions about stability and transformation. Could it be that life's beauty lies precisely in its transience, much like the fleeting colors of a sunset? Or are we still clinging to the comforting illusion of permanence, as Parmenides might suggest? In essence, Nietzsche's critique dismantles the traditional frameworks that have shaped Western thought for centuries. He challenges us to embrace a worldview where eternity is not a timeless realm beyond our reach, but an ever-present cycle of renewal and decay. To borrow the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson, all things are in flux, and we must adjust ourselves to the river of change. Through this lens, Nietzsche's Eternal Recurrence becomes not just a philosophical theory, but a call to live authentically and fully in the face of life's endless ebb and flow. Influence from Heraclitus. Nietzsche was profoundly influenced by Heraclitus' concept of becoming, a notion that fundamentally shaped his philosophical perspective. He declares Heraclitus will remain eternally right with his assertion that being is an empty fiction. This bold statement reflects Nietzsche's rejection of static conceptions of existence and his embrace of a dynamic, ever-changing reality. The death of the Christian God, as Nietzsche famously proclaimed, compelled him to rediscover the wisdom of the ancient world. In doing so, he revitalized classical ideas that aligned closely with his own vision of life. Nietzsche identifies three elements in Heraclitus: philosophy that becomes central motifs in his teachings, life as eternal war, polarity, and tension, life as becoming and flux, and life as play, the world of Zoot. These themes are not merely abstract ideas, but vivid reflections of the human condition. Consider the notion of life as eternal war. Is not every moment of our existence a struggle between opposing forces, desire and restraint, creation and destruction, joy and suffering? The second element, life as becoming and flux, invites us to embrace change rather than resist it. As Heraclitus famously observed, "No man ever steps in the same river twice," a sentiment Nietzsche echoed in his own writings. Lastly, the idea of life as play introduces an element of lightness and creativity into Nietzsche's philosophy. Life, much like a game, thrives on spontaneity and movement rather than rigid rules. These elements form the foundation for Nietzsche's key concepts of the will to power and the eternal recurrence. They remind us that life is not a static entity but a vibrant interplay of forces, constantly shifting and evolving. To fully grasp Nietzsche's philosophy, one must recognize how these ancient ideas infuse his modern critique of morality, religion, and metaphysics with vitality and depth. The concept of will to power. The concept of the will to power serves as the cornerstone of Nietzsche's theory of eternal recurrence and forms the bedrock of his metaphysical framework. Nietzsche is often celebrated as a philosopher of life, a thinker who sought to breathe vitality and dynamism into the human experience. Martin Heidegger, one of Nietzsche's most astute interpreters, refers to Nietzsche's philosophy as a metaphysics of being. And indeed, Heidegger is correct in asserting that Nietzsche is a metaphysician, with the doctrine of eternal recurrence representing a teaching where being is thought in its deepest sense. Yet, it is crucial to understand that whenever Nietzsche critiques metaphysics, he is not rejecting the idea of metaphysics altogether. Instead, his opposition is directed squarely at the Platonic Christian tradition, which conceives of being as something fixed, unchanging, and transcendent, qualities that Nietzsche finds deeply antithetical to the vibrant, ever-evolving nature of existence. For Nietzsche, the rejection of a static metaphysics does not imply an abandonment of metaphysical inquiry. On the contrary, he seeks to redefine it. His metaphysics is rooted in the dynamic interplay of forces, where being is understood not as a rigid, eternal essence but as a process of constant becoming. This perspective aligns with his broader critique of traditional values. Just as Nietzsche, the so-called immoralist, is not advocating for a world devoid of morality but rather searching for values that transcend simplistic dichotomies of good and evil, so too is his metaphysics a call to embrace a more fluid and life-affirming understanding of reality. Consider, for instance, how a river's power lies not in its stillness but in its relentless flow. Might this be a metaphor for Nietzsche's vision of existence? To further illustrate this point, imagine a tree bending against the wind. Its strength does not come from resisting change, but from adapting to it, growing stronger through the very act of enduring and transforming. Similarly, Nietzsche's will to power is not about domination in the crude sense, but about the intrinsic desire within all living beings to grow, create, and overcome obstacles. As he provocatively asks, what would existence be worth if there were no challenges to overcome? This question underscores the centrality of struggle and growth in his philosophy. In essence, Nietzsche's metaphysics of becoming challenges us to rethink our assumptions about permanence and stability. Where Plato and Christianity see a world governed by immutable truths, Nietzsche sees a universe alive with creative and destructive forces. To borrow a phrase from William James, the art of being wise is the art of knowing what to overlook. Nietzsche's wisdom lies in his ability to overlook the illusion of permanence and instead focus on the ceaseless flux of life. Through this lens, the will to power becomes not merely a philosophical abstraction, but a profound invitation to live fully, authentically, and courageously in a world defined by change. Relationship between will to power and eternal recurrence. The two foundational concepts of the will to power and the eternal recurrence initially appear to contradict one another, the will to power symbolizing endless development and the eternal recurrence representing unchanging sameness. How can these seemingly opposing ideas coexist? On the surface, the will to power embodies a relentless drive to growth, transformation, and dominance, while eternal recurrence suggests a repetitive cycle where the same events unfold endlessly. Yet, Nietzsche himself perceives no contradiction between the two. He reconciles this apparent paradox by describing becoming as a form of being, thereby rendering the two concepts compatible. In essence, the dynamic process of change and growth becoming is itself an integral aspect of existence being. This profound insight bridges the gap between the two ideas, demonstrating that they are not mutually exclusive but deeply intertwined. This relationship is beautifully captured in Heraclitus' famous quote, which encapsulates both becoming and constant flux: "No man ever steps in the same river twice." At first glance, this statement underscores the ever-changing nature of life. Each step into the river represents a unique moment, a distinct experience. However, the river itself persists, and the act of stepping into it repeats endlessly. Thus, the river serves not only as a symbol of becoming, but also of sameness and repetition, a form of being. In fact, Nietzsche asserts, the eternal recurrence, this teaching of Zarathustra, might have already been taught by Heraclitus. This connection illustrates how Nietzsche's philosophy draws upon ancient wisdom to articulate a vision of life that embraces both change and constancy. The eternal recurrence does not negate the will to power, rather, it amplifies it by suggesting that every moment, no matter how insignificant, holds infinite importance because it will recurrently. Reflect on this. If you knew that your actions today would repeat infinitely, how would you choose to live? Would you push yourself harder to create, to grow, to overcome challenges, knowing that these efforts would resonate throughout eternity? The compatibility of the will to power and eternal recurrence invites us to view life as both a dynamic process and a timeless, cyclically harmonious interplay of creation and repetition that defines our very existence. Life is play. And ultimately, life is play, a concept that Nietzsche articulates with striking profundity, when he refers to the cosmos as the innocence of becoming. The world in Nietzsche's vision is an eternal theatre of dynamic forces, a ceaseless interplay of tension and release, destruction and renewal, perishing and becoming. It is a grand, unending cycle driven by the will to create and to destroy, to struggle and to expand. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the doctrine of eternal recurrence emerges as Zarathustra's abysmal thought and central teaching, a concept so vast and unsettling that it challenges the very core of human understanding. This eternal recurrence encompasses all aspects of existence, creation and destruction, joy and suffering, good and evil. Life, in this sense, is not a linear progression but a vibrant, cyclical dance where opposites coexist and define one another. Yet, if everything eternally recurs, this includes not only the noble and the beautiful but also the contemptible and the mundane. Most troubling of all is the figure of the last man, a symbol of mediocrity and complacency, who stands in stark contrast to the ideal of the overman. How can we reconcile the eternal return of the last man being defined by his aversion to risk, growth, and greatness with the lofty vision of the overman, who embraces life in all its complexity and chaos? Nietzsche seems to suggest that the eternal recurrence is not a selective process. It does not discriminate between the heroic and the banal. Instead, it demands that we confront the totality of existence, including its most unsettling aspects. As he provocatively asks, what if you had to live the same life over and over again? Would you embrace it, or would you recoil in despair? To illustrate this idea, consider the analogy of a child at play. A child builds and castles only to knock them down, reveling in both the act of creation and destruction. There is no attachment to permanence, no fear of loss, only the pure joy of engagement. Could it be that Nietzsche's vision of life invites us to adopt a similar attitude? To live as if life itself were a form of play, where the value lies not in the final outcome but in the process, the movement, the sheer vitality of the experience. As George Bernard Shaw once remarked, we don't stop playing because we grow old, we grow old because we stop playing. Nietzsche's philosophy urges us to resist the stagnation of the last man and instead embrace the fluid, ever-changing nature of existence. In essence, the eternal recurrence challenges us to rethink our relationship with life not as a burden to endure, a puzzle to solve, but as a dynamic, creative process to be celebrated. It calls on us to affirm life in its entirety, embracing both its heights and depths, its beauty and its ugliness. Through this lens, the notion of life as play becomes not a trivialization of existence, but a profound affirmation of its richness and complexity. The eternal recurrence is both a warning and an invitation, a warning against settling for mediocrity, and an invitation to strive for greatness, to become creators of our own values, and to live as if every moment matters infinitely. Zarathustra and Eternal Recurrence. Zarathustra is overwhelmed with anguish as he places his hopes for humanity in a pivotal historical moment, the transition from man to the overman. Alas, man recurs eternally. The last man recurs eternally. I had seen them both naked, the greatest man and the smallest man, all too similar to one another, even the greatest all too human, the greatest all too small. That was my all too small, that was my disgusted man, an eternal recurrence even for the smallest, that was my disgusted all existence. The enormity of this realization crushes Zarathustra. So consumed by despair is he that he lies motionless for 7 days, refusing food and drink. His suffering highlights the immense difficulty of accepting such a doctrine. How could anyone embrace the notion that not only the noble and heroic aspects of life recur, but also the trivial, the petty, and the contemptible? Yet, amid his torment, Zarathustra's animals remain by his side, offering companionship and insight. While still recovering, his animals speak to him. Everything goes, everything returns, the wheel of existence rolls forever. Everything dies, everything blossoms anew. The year of existence runs on forever. Everything breaks, everything is joined anew. The same house of existence builds itself forever. Everything departs, everything meets again. The ring of existence is true to itself forever. Existence begins in every instant. The ball there rolls around every here. The middle is everywhere. The path of eternity is crooked. These words capture the essence of eternal recurrence. Life is an endless cycle of creation and destruction, departure and return. The animals elaborate further, saying, "For your animals well know, O Zarathustra, who you are and must become. Behold, you are the teacher of the eternal recurrence. That is now your destiny. That you have to be the first to teach this doctrine. How should this great destiny, that also be your greatest danger and sickness? Behold, we know what you teach, that all things recur eternally and we ourselves with them, and that we have already existed an infinite number of times with us." This teaching is not merely a philosophical concept, it is a profound existential challenge. Imagine knowing that every action, every word, every decision you've ever made will repeat infinitely. Would you live differently? Would you strive to create a life so meaningful that you would willingly relive it for eternity? The animals continue, "You teach that there is a great year of becoming, a colossus of a year. This year must, like an hourglass, turn itself over again and again, so that it may run down and run out anew. And if you should die now, O Zarathustra, behold, we know to what you would then say to your animals. Ask you not to. You would say, and without trembling, but rather grasping for happiness, for a great and oppression would have been lifted from you, most patient of men. Now I die and decay, you would say, and in an instant I shall be nothingness. Souls are as mortal as bodies. But the complex of causes in which I am entangled will recur. It will create me again. I myself am part of these causes of the eternal recurrence. I shall return, with this sun, with this earth, with this eagle, with the serpent, not to a new life or a better life or a similar life. I shall return eternally to this identical, unself-faced life, in the greatest things and in the smallest, to teach once more the eternal recurrence of all things, to speak once more the teaching of the great Newtonid of earth and man, to tell man of the overman once more. This passage emphasizes the cyclical nature of existence and the inevitability of eternal recurrence. It challenges us to consider whether we would face this reality with fear or with joy. Zarathustra's journey from despair to acceptance mirrors the ultimate test of affirming life itself. Reflect on this. If you were Zarathustra, would you rise above your despair and embrace the eternal recurrence as your destiny? Or would the weight of it crush your spirit? As Nietzsche reminds us, he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. Perhaps the key lies in finding meaning in the repetition, in seeing each moment as an opportunity to affirm life in its entirety. Conclusion and call to action. After Zarathustra's recovery, he finds himself grappling with the spirit of gravity, a metaphorical dwarf that embodies the oppressive weight of existence, a perspective that views life as a burden to be endured rather than a dynamic force to be embraced. This spirit of gravity is not merely an external adversary, but a manifestation of Zarathustra's own reflective doubt, his fear that he might be dragged down by the overwhelming implications of the eternal recurrence. It is here, at this pivotal moment, that Zarathustra confronts the dwarf with a profound riddle, one that encapsulates the essence of Nietzsche's philosophy. Behold this gateway, dwarf. It has two aspects. Two paths come together here. No one has ever reached their end. This long lane behind us, it goes on for an eternity, and that long lane ahead of us, that is another eternity. They are in opposition to one another. And it is here at this gateway that they come together. The name of the gateway is written above it. Moment. Zarathustra continues, challenging the dwarf and by extension, the reader, to consider the implications of these converging paths. But if one were to follow them further and ever further and further, do you think, dwarf, that these paths would be in eternal opposition? From this gateway moment along, Eternal lane runs back, and eternity lies behind us. Must not all things that can run have already run on this lane? Must not all things that can happen have already happened, been done, run past? And if all things have been here before, what do you think of this moment, dwarf? Must not this gateway, too, have been here before? And are not all things bound fast together in such a way that this moment draws after it all future things? Therefore it draws itself too. For all things that can run must also run once again forward along this long lane, must we not or have been here before? And must we not return and run down that other lane out before us, down that long, terrible lane must we not return eternally? This passage serves as both a philosophical challenge and a call to action. It forces us to confront the cyclical nature of existence, the idea that every moment, every decision, every triumph and failure will recur infinitely. In reading thus spoke Zarathustra, we, as readers, experience our own version of the eternal return. We encounter the recurring cycles of hope and despair, descent and ascent, sociality and isolation, love and contempt, parable and parody, lower and higher, earth and heaven, snake and eagle, all of which permeate the book. These dualities are not contradictions, but complementary forces that define the richness of life. In the climactic moment of the book, Zarathustra rises to his feet and fully accepts the doctrine of eternal recurrence. He becomes the ultimate life affirmer, the quintessential yes-sayer, embracing existence in its totality. He dedicates his dithyramb on all eternity to the higher man, those who aspire to transcend their limitations and embody the ideal of the overman. This act of affirmation is not a denial of suffering or struggle, but a courageous acceptance of life in all its complexity. As Nietzsche reminds us, to live is to suffer, to survive is to make meaning from suffering. Zarathustra's acceptance of the eternal recurrence is the ultimate act of creating meaning from the chaos of existence. Both Zarathustra's soul and Dionysus, the god of ecstasy, creativity, and destruction, represent the highest kind of being. They embody the fusion of opposites, the unity of creation and destruction, joy and suffering, life and death. Zarathustra declares, I, the last disciple of the philosopher Dionysus, I, the teacher of the eternal recurrence.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something that's super trippy.
Oh, yeah.
It's Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence.
I love this one.
Have you heard of this? This is basically the idea that you live your life over and over and over again.
Infinitely.
The same exact life.
Yeah.
Every little high, every little low, everything.
Single moment.
And that is, I don't know about you, but when I first heard that, it just kind of blew my mind.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be looking at a YouTube video essay that really dives deep into this and sort of unpacks all of the different facets of it. And the first thing I want to mention is how Nietzsche himself came up with this idea.
Yeah. So how did this idea come to him?
Well, he was walking through the woods one day.
Okay.
And he saw this huge rock formation, and it kind of just hit him.
It's funny how these huge, like, world-shattering ideas can come from the most, mundane things, like just a walk in the woods.
A walk in the woods.
Yeah.
Just seeing a big rock.
Yeah.
That's kind of how our brains work, I guess.
Yeah, totally.
But okay. So, eternal recurrence. How do we even begin to think about that?
Right.
I mean, it's such a big concept.
It's a huge one. The video starts out with this really evocative image.
Okay.
It describes a demon appearing to you
Right.
in your loneliest loneliness.
That's creepy.
It is. And the demon tells you that you're going to relive every single moment of your life exactly as it happened.
Whoa.
For all eternity.
Okay. I think I'd need a therapist if someone told me that.
Totally. It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
The video talks about how most people would be terrified of this idea.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I think it's natural to be afraid of the unknown.
Right.
Right. And then there's also the question of, like,
Yeah.
who wants to relive all those embarrassing moments?
Oh, God.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
all the cringe-worthy stuff we'd rather forget.
Over again.
Exactly. But there's actually another side to this too, like a silver lining.
Right.
It's kind of the ultimate yes to life.
Oh, interesting.
If you can say yes to all of it, the good, the bad, the embarrassing,
Right.
that's a deep level of acceptance.
I see.
It's like radical acceptance.
Yeah.
Most of us can only dream of reaching that level.
Right.
Of being okay with everything.
That brings us to one of Nietzsche's most famous ideas.
Yeah.
Amor fati.
Oh, yeah, amor fati. Love of fate.
And it's really important to understand that Nietzsche wasn't saying that eternal recurrence is actually happening.
Right.
It's scientifically, literally happening.
It's not about a literal interpretation.
Right. He's using it as more of like a thought experiment.
Exactly.
Like a lens to look at your life through.
Yeah. Could you love your fate, warts and all?
Right.
Even if it meant repeating it infinitely?
Whoa, yeah.
That's the question he's asking us to grapple with.
I mean, are there even any parts of your life that you would be willing to repeat infinitely?
Yeah, that's a good question for everyone listening, too.
Yeah, listeners, what about you?
What parts of your life would you be okay with experiencing again and again?
And what parts would you be like, oh, God, no. Please, no.
Exactly.
But, the interesting thing about Nietzsche is he wasn't like some guru living on a mountaintop.
Right.
Telling everyone how to be happy.
He was a real person.
He was a sickly dude.
Dealing with real struggles.
And he was in a lot of pain, actually.
Yeah. Chronic pain.
Yeah.
You'd think he'd be the first person to reject this whole eternal recurrence thing.
Exactly. Like, no thanks, I'm good.
Yeah.
I've had enough of this life.
Yeah.
One time is plenty.
Right. But he actually found moments where this idea became beautiful to him. The video talks about how he believed pain and pleasure are inseparable, like two sides of the same coin. Maybe the difficult experiences, the painful ones, they actually make the joyful moments even more intense.
So it's like saying without the lows, the highs wouldn't mean as much.
Yeah, I think that's part of it.
That's deep.
It's like a cosmic balance.
Yeah. And this also puts him in direct opposition to traditional ideas about heaven.
Right.
Escaping this earthly realm.
Eternal recurrence throws the whole afterlife concept out the window.
Yeah.
It's all about this life right here, right now.
Cycling endlessly.
It really makes you think about how you're living your life.
It does.
Makes every choice feel more significant.
Because it could potentially happen again and again.
Exactly. It's not just a one-time deal.
And it's interesting to note that Nietzsche was really inspired by Heraclitus.
Oh, yeah, the Greek philosopher.
Yeah. He believed in constant change. Like the famous saying, you never step in the same river twice.
Right. Because the river's constantly flowing, changing.
Everything is in flux.
Including ourselves.
That's a good segue into another big Nietzschean concept.
Okay. What's that?
The will to power.
Ah, yes. The will to power. So often misunderstood.
People think it's all about dominating others.
Right. It's not about being a dictator.
Being power hungry.
It's much deeper than that.
So what is it really about then?
It's about that inner drive we all have to grow to overcome challenges, to become more fully ourselves.
Okay, so not about bossing people around?
Nope, not at all.
But about self-improvement.
Exactly. It's about pushing yourself to be better.
But how does that connect to eternal recurrence? They seem kind of opposite.
Right. On the surface, they do.
You're striving to become something new, but then it all just repeats anyway.
That's where Nietzsche gets really mind-bending.
Okay, I'm listening.
They actually work together. You're constantly pushing yourself, striving to become more. Yeah. And those efforts echo through eternity. It adds this incredible weight to every single choice.
Like every decision has infinite consequences.
Exactly. Because it's shaping not just this life, but potentially countless repetitions of it.
Whoa, that's intense.
To illustrate this, the video uses this really cool metaphor.
Okay, what is it?
Kids building sand castles on the beach. They build them up, knock them down, no big deal.
I love that.
And then they start all over again.
It's about the process.
Yes. It's about the act of creating and experiencing.
Not clinging to some fixed outcome.
Exactly. Does that make the idea eternal recurrence a little less scary?
Maybe even a little bit fun.
Right. If you think of each repetition as a chance to play the game a little differently.
That's a much more playful perspective than I would have expected.
Nietzsche can be surprisingly playful sometimes.
But we can't talk about eternal recurrence without mentioning Zarathustra.
Oh, yeah, the main character in his book.
Right. Thus spoke Zarathustra.
It's a wild ride.
He has a pretty rough time with this whole concept, doesn't he?
Oh, he does. At first, his reaction is pure horror.
Oh, wow.
Like, can't get out of bed, existential dread kind of horror.
Yeah, I can see why.
And I think this is where we see Nietzsche's own struggles coming through.
Even he found it tough to swallow at first.
Absolutely.
I mean, that makes it seem a lot more relatable.
Definitely. He wasn't immune to the fear and anxiety this idea can provoke.
But then Zarathustra has these animal companions who come to his aid, right?
He does. They're like his spirit guides,
Okay.
but also kind of funny.
Okay, I like that.
On one level, they're symbolic, representing different parts of Zarathustra's psyche,
Interesting.
but they're also just these quirky, fun characters.
And so they're like his wise, furry cheerleaders,
Yeah, something like that.
nudging him toward a more positive perspective.
Exactly. And they help him see the potential beauty in this seemingly terrifying idea.
Okay.
One of them says to him, "Everything goes, everything returns, eternally rolls the wheel of existence."
That's beautiful.
It is, right?
But it makes me a little dizzy, too.
I know, it's this constant cycle of creation and destruction.
Over and over again.
But I think what they're trying to show, Zarathustra, is that this cycle is at the very heart of existence.
It's not something to be feared,
Exactly.
but something to be understood.
And even embraced.
Whoa.
And eventually, Zarathustra comes to accept this.
He even celebrates it.
He does. Which is pretty amazing considering how much he struggled at first.
So how does he get there? What's the secret to going from terror to celebration?
Well, it's not really a secret. It's more like a gradual process of understanding.
Okay.
His animal companions remind him that he's supposed to teach this doctrine of eternal recurrence.
Okay.
That is his destiny.
That's a lot of pressure.
It is. Imagine having to tell everyone that they're going to relive their lives endlessly.
Hey, guess what? You get to do it all over again. Have a nice day.
Haha, exactly. But it's also incredibly empowering.
How so?
Because it means Zarathustra has this opportunity to help people see the world in a new way.
To find meaning in this cycle.
Right. To find meaning in the repetition.
Okay, so what does this mean for us?
Yeah, what about us regular folks?
We're not exactly tasked with teaching the world about eternal recurrence.
Right. What's the takeaway for our everyday lives?
Exactly.
I think it goes back to the idea of amor fati.
Loving your fate.
If we can learn to accept and even embrace all parts of our lives,
The good, the bad, the beautiful, the messy.
then maybe this idea of eternal recurrence becomes less terrifying and more liberating.
It's like we're being challenged to find beauty in the repetition.
To see each moment as a chance to create something worthwhile, knowing it might echo throughout eternity.
But what if there are parts of my life I just don't want to repeat? What if there are choices I regret?
That's where the will to power comes in.
Right, that inner drive to grow and become better.
Exactly. And when we combine that with eternal recurrence, it suggests that every effort, every step forward has this incredible significance.
It's like each choice is amplified because it's not just shaping this life.
But potentially countless others.
So if I'm constantly trying to be better,
Yeah.
to make more mindful choices, maybe those echoes will become more positive over time.
Exactly. It's like you're creating a ripple effect of positivity that extends through eternity.
Wow. That's a pretty amazing thought.
It is. It makes you think about the kind of life you're creating.
Yeah.
And whether you'd be proud to repeat it.
A life full of meaning and purpose.
And, dare I say, even a bit of fun. Remember Nietzsche's metaphor of the kids building sandcastles?
Right. That lightness, that playfulness.
It's not about clinging to some perfect outcome.
But about the joy of the process.
Exactly. And I think that's a really valuable perspective to bring to our own lives.
Whether we believe in eternal recurrence as a literal truth or not.
It encourages us to lighten up, to embrace the journey, to find joy in the act of becoming.
But Zarathustra doesn't just skip through life building sandcastles.
No, he doesn't.
He goes through some pretty intense stuff.
He does. His journey toward embracing eternal recurrence is not easy.
Right.
He goes through periods of despair, isolation,
Oh.
and he even has a pretty intense encounter with what he calls the spirit of gravity.
Ooh, that sounds ominous.
It is. It's this metaphorical figure that represents everything that weighs us down. All the negativity and pessimism that prevents us from embracing life fully.
So the opposite of amor fati,
Exactly. It's like the inner voice that tells us we're not good enough.
that we should just give up.
That life is meaningless.
Oof, we all know that voice.
We do. And Zarathustra has to confront this spirit of gravity head on.
He has to wrestle with his own doubts and fears.
In order to fully embrace eternal recurrence.
It's a real struggle, but he comes out stronger on the other side.
He does. It's a powerful transformation.
Sounds like this spirit of gravity is something we all have to deal with.
Yeah, I can read it.
Whether we're facing the prospect of repeating our lives,
Right?
or just trying to get through a Tuesday.
Exactly. Life throws challenges at us no matter what.
And that's actually where we'll pick up in part 2 of this deep dive.
Oh, can't wait.
We're going to explore Zarathustra's struggle with the spirit of gravity in more detail.
We'll see how he overcomes those negative forces.
And we'll delve into the connection between Zarathustra and another fascinating figure, Dionysus.
Dionysus, the Greek god of ecstasy and wine.
He knew how to have a good time.
He did. And we'll explore how that connects to the idea of becoming a yes-sayer in the face of eternity.
That's a great cliffhanger.
See there?
All right, so we're back, and we're picking up with Zarathustra.
Yeah, he's still grappling with this whole eternal recurrence thing.
And last time we left off with him facing down the spirit of gravity.
Right, that embodiment of negativity and pessimism.
It's kind of like that voice inside all of us.
Yeah, the one that tells us to give up, that nothing matters.
So how does Zarathustra actually deal with this spirit of gravity? Does he, argue with it?
He does, but not in a straightforward way. He confronts it with a riddle.
A riddle. Okay, I'm intrigued.
He asks the spirit of gravity to imagine a gateway called moment.
Right, that image. We talked about that before.
Behind it stretches eternity past. Ahead of it lies eternity future.
And we're right here in this single fleeting moment.
Exactly. And Zarathustra uses this image to kind of mess with the spirit of gravity's whole worldview.
I can see how that would be pretty disorienting.
It's like if everything has already happened and will happen again, then what does this particular moment, this moment really mean?
That's a deep question.
It really is. It's like he's challenging the spirit of gravity to see the paradox.
The paradox of eternal recurrence.
Yeah, if every moment is both unique and a repetition,
then it's both incredibly significant and kind of meaningless at the same time.
Right. It's like saying each moment is everything and nothing all at once.
No wonder Zarathustra is having such a hard time with this.
But it's through this struggle, this wrestling with these big ideas, that he has a breakthrough.
Okay, what happens?
He realizes that the meaning of life isn't found in some grand external purpose.
It's not about achieving something specific.
It's about the act of living itself. It's about embracing the will to power.
Right, that inner drive to grow and overcome.
And that constant striving, that creating.
That's what makes us who we are.
Exactly. And when we combine that with eternal recurrence, it suggests that we should be saying yes to life.
Even with all its repetitions and potential for pain.
Even with all of it. Because it's all part of this grand eternal dance.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. But there's still this part of me that's like, what if there are parts of my life I just don't want to repeat?
I think that's a natural feeling. We all have regrets, things we wish we could change.
But if everything repeats, wouldn't that mean those regrets would repeat too?
That's where Zarathustra's encounter with Dionysus comes in.
Wait, Dionysus, the Greek god of wine and partying. What does he have to do with this?
Dionysus represents this raw, untamed energy.
Okay.
This force that embraces both creation and destruction, joy and sorrow.
So he's kind of like the patron saint of saying yes to everything.
You could say that. And Zarathustra actually comes to identify as a disciple of Dionysus.
He calls himself the teacher of the eternal recurrence.
It's a pretty bold statement.
So he's not just accepting this idea, he's fully embracing it.
He's celebrating it. He sees it as the key to a more meaningful and vibrant life.
But how? How can repeating your life over and over again be a good thing?
Because it means that every moment matters.
Yeah.
Every choice, every action has this ripple effect that extends through eternity.
So even the bad stuff?
Even the bad stuff. It's all part of the dance. It's all part of what makes us who we are.
This is a lot to take in. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all.
It's definitely mind-bending stuff.
But I think I'm starting to see the beauty in it, the potential for a richer, more fulfilling life.
That's what Nietzsche was hoping for. He wanted us to embrace the fullness of life.
To say yes to all of it, even the parts that scare us or make us uncomfortable.
And to find joy in the very act of living, even knowing it might all happen again.
And again and again and again.
Exactly. So the next time you find yourself struggling with something, maybe try to see it through the lens of eternal recurrence.
Like, would I be willing to repeat this experience?
I mean, if not, what can I do to change it? How can I use my will to power?
To create a life that's worth repeating.
A life that's full of meaning and purpose and joy. I think that's a pretty powerful message.
It is. And I think that's a good place to wrap up part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds good to me.
All right, deep divers, we are back for the final part of our eternal recurrence journey.
I'm excited to see where we end up.
Yeah, me too. Last time we left off with Zarathustra going head-to-head with the spirit of gravity.
Right. All that negativity and pessimism.
And I'm really curious how he actually gets OT of that one.
Well, it's a pretty intense showdown.
I bet.
And it really highlights this philosophical struggle that we all face.
Okay, so how does Zarathustra defeat this spirit of gravity?
Well, he uses a pretty clever tactic. He confronts it with a riddle.
A riddle, okay.
He asks the spirit of gravity to imagine a gateway called moment.
Right, that image.
Behind it is all of eternity past.
Okay.
And in front of it, all of eternity future.
I see where this is going.
And Zarathustra uses this to challenge the spirit of gravity's whole perspective.
It's like he's saying, if everything has already happened and will happen again, then what does this moment really mean?
Exactly. It's like, if everything is predetermined, why does anything matter?
Whoa, that's a mind-blowing question.
It's a question that could send anyone into an existential crisis.
I know, I'm feeling a little dizzy just thinking about it.
But by asking this question, Zarathustra forces the spirit of gravity to confront the paradox.
The paradox at the heart of eternal recurrence.
If every moment is both unique and a repetition, then it has infinite significance, and it's kind of meaningless all at the same time.
So each moment is everything and nothing at the same time.
That's the paradox.
No wonder Zarathustra is struggling so much with this.
It's a tough concept to wrap your head around.
But through this struggle,
yeah,
through wrestling with these contradictory ideas,
Zarathustra reaches a breakthrough.
He does. Okay, what is it?
He realizes that the meaning of life isn't found in some big external purpose.
Okay.
It's not about achieving something specific or reaching some final destination.
It's about the journey itself.
Exactly. It's about the act of living.
Embracing the will to power, that constant striving.
And creating. That's what makes us who we are.
So it's not about escaping the cycle of eternal recurrence.
No, it's about finding a way to embrace it, to celebrate it.
To say yes to life,
right,
with all its ups and downs.
Even with all the pain and suffering that comes with being alive.
Because it's all part of this grand eternal dance.
Exactly. And that's where Zarathustra's journey intersects with another really interesting character, Dionysus.
Dionysus, as in the Greek god of wine and ecstasy.
The one and only.
Okay, this is getting even more wild than I expected.
Yeah.
How does a Greek god fit into all of this?
Well, Dionysus represents this raw, untamed energy.
Okay.
A force that embraces both creation and destruction, joy and sorrow, life and death.
So he's kind of like the patron saint of living life to the fullest.
I like that. The patron saint of saying yes to everything.
And Zarathustra actually comes to identify as a disciple of Dionysus.
He calls himself the teacher of the eternal recurrence.
So he's not just accepting this idea anymore. He's actively promoting it.
He's celebrating it. He sees it as the key to a more meaningful and joyful life.
But how can repeating your life over and over again be a good thing? I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
Because it means that every moment matters. Every choice, every action has this incredible ripple effect that extends through eternity.
So even the small stuff, the seemingly insignificant moments, they all have this cosmic weight to them.
Exactly. And that's what makes life so precious, so full of possibility.
I'm starting to see it now. The beauty of eternal recurrence. The potential for a truly fulfilling life.
That's what Nietzsche was hoping for. He wanted us to see the world in a new way, to embrace the fullness of life.
To say yes to all of it, even the parts that scare us or make us uncomfortable.
Because it's all part of the journey, part of what makes us who we are.
Wow, that's a powerful message. It's a lot to take in, but I think it's worth reflecting on.
Definitely. It challenges us to think about how we're living our lives, the choices we're making.
And whether we'd be willing to repeat them over and over again for all eternity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question to ponder.
Ooh, I like a good cliffhanger.
What moment from your life would you choose to repeat for all eternity? Think about it. What experience, what feeling, what connection is so precious to you that you'd be willing to relive it again and again? And until next time, happy deep diving.
That's all for today, folks. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Through this article, we've explored eternal recurrence, a challenging yet life-affirming concept. It's not just a philosophical hypothesis, but also an invitation to love your fate, embrace everything that happens in life, and live each moment fully. As Nietzsche wrote, "What matters is not the final goal, but the path leading to it." We hope this article has inspired you to reflect on your own life. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to True Freedom, and share your thoughts in the comments. Would you be willing to live your life over and over again? Let us know. Thank you for joining us on this video. See you in the next one, where we'll continue exploring fascinating ideas to help you live more freely and meaningfully. Have a great day ahead.